بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. عن حذيفة رضي الله عنه أنه قال: حدثنا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم حديثين قد رأيت أحدهما وأنا أنتظر الآخر. Huzaifa ibn al-Yaman radiyallahu an is one of the senior companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, whose special interest was the signs of the Day of Judgment. So Huzaifa once said to his students that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam told us two things. I have seen one of them in my life and I am waiting for the other. So the first thing that I have seen already is that أن الأمانة نزلت في جذر قلوب الرجال ثم نزل القرآن فعلموا من القرآن ما علموا وعلموا من السنة ما علموا. That amana, meaning honesty, first was given to the people, and then after that Quran was revealed. So people learn from Quran and people learn from Sunnah. So I have seen this, that amana was given to the people, and after that they accepted Islam. Then after that, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam told us the second thing, and I'm waiting for that thing to happen. And what is it? ثُمَّ حَدَّثَنَا عَنْ رَفْعِ الْأَمَانَةِ. That Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam told us that this amana one day will be erased from the hearts of the people. يَنَامُ الرَّجُلُ النَّوْمَةَ فَتُقْبَضُ الْأَمَانَةُ عَنْ قَلْبِهِ فَيَظَلُّ أَثَرُهَا مِثْلَ الْوَقْتِ. So one will sleep, and next morning when he will wake up, he will find that amana is gone from his heart. And it has left only an impression. Then he will sleep again, and he will find that amana is completely gone, it totally disappeared. Not even an impression is left. So Huzaifa ibn al-Yaman in this hadith is saying that when Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam became prophet and the Quran was given to him, according to Allah's scheme, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's planning, people, those who had to accept Islam, were made honest. And on the basis of their honesty, it was so easy for them to accept Islam. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam received the first revelation and he came to Sayyidah Khadija radiyallahu anha. It didn't take him long to convince her. As soon as he shared his story, his experience of the first revelation with Sayyidah Khadija radiyallahu anha, she accepted Islam right at that moment. She was the first Muslimah. When Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam went to Abu Bakr Siddiq radiyallahu anhu and he experienced his story with him, he accepted Islam right away. Next day, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam had at least 7 people who had accepted Islam. Sayyidah Khadija, Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radiyallahu anhu, Ali ibn Abi Talib, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, Usman ibn Affan radiyallahu anhum. These few companions accepted Islam. Why? They accepted Islam without any hesitation. And why Abu Jahl and Abu Lahab, they died but they never accepted Islam? That is because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given these companions amana and honesty in their heart, so it was easy for them to accept the message. And then Huzaifa is saying that towards the end of time, this honesty will be taken away. So when people will lose honesty, they will lose iman. That's why there is a hadith, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam says, La imana liman la amanata lah. One who does not have amana, one who does not have honesty, he does not have iman. So honesty is the seed, and that seed has to be, those seeds have to be spread throughout the field, then only they will grow. Now, what is the meaning of honesty? Look, we want to be honest to our customers if we are in business, to our employees if we are employers, or to our employers if we are employees, and to those people whom we interact in our life. But did we ever think that before anyone else, we deserve that we become honest to ourselves? First, we have to be honest with ourselves. How do we become honest with ourselves? We have to admit one thing, and that is that I do not know everything. What I know is far less than what I don't know. My knowledge is very little. If you do not admit this, it means you're not being honest to yourself. Honesty is that you admit this, that I am an ignorant person. Yes, I have degree in this field and in that field, and I have completed my master's and my PhD and my graduation and all that. Yes, but my ignorance, if compared with knowledge that exists out there, or my knowledge if compared with knowledge that exists out there, is very little, is less than a drop in the ocean. Once you have this in your mind, then most likely you will not be misguided. But if you think that, I know everything about deen, I know this hadith and this ayah and that ayah, and I can interpret the Quran on my own, and I can understand the hadith on my own, and this hadith is wrong, and that imam did wrong, and that alim made a mistake, and things like that, so on and so forth, then that's when you will start making mistake. That means you're not honest to yourself. And if you're not honest to yourself, then wait until you start losing your iman. Because this is what Rasulullah ﷺ said, La imana liman la amanata lah. Our today's topic is about atheism, irrationality of atheism, and rationality of Islam. And I know some of you came here only for this topic, and I want to quickly jump on this issue. As I mentioned through this hadith, that towards the end of time, people will be losing iman. We are actually witnessing that time. There are a lot of people who are losing their faith. A lot of youth are losing their iman. They are becoming apostate, agnostic, or they're just confused. And if they want to remain Muslim, they remain Muslim with so many doubts in mind. They are so apologetic. If they're ever asked questions, for example, about the age of Aisha radiyallahu anha, question about Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam having more than 4 wives, these types of catchy questions, so they feel uncomfortable. And they think, how do I respond? Is it really what Rasulullah ﷺ did? Was it really moral? How do I judge Rasulullah ﷺ? And first of all, how, there are people that they are putting themselves in the position of judging Rasulullah ﷺ based on today's morality. And when they continuously think about these issues, then over time, they lose their faith in Rasulullah ﷺ and later on in the Quran. This is the problem, and it's not something that's happening here and there. It exists on a wider scale. A lot of people are like that. It is our fault. It is not Islam's fault. People are not leaving Islam because there is a problem in Islam. People are leaving Islam because there is a problem in us. And our problem is that we're not able to talk to our youth. We're not able to convince them. We're not able to teach them what is reality. That is a problem. And the bigger problem is that we ourselves don't know things. So in today's talk, inshallah, I will talk about few things briefly. These few things are the core cause of atheism in our community. Once I received a call by a person, and he said that The reason why I became ex-Muslim is because I came across a hadith, and this hadith just does not make any sense, but the hadith is authentic, and therefore I don't believe in Islam anymore. He said, I asked him, what is the hadith? So he said, the hadith is that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala comes down to the worldly heaven at the time of tahajjud, and he makes this announcement that, is there anyone who seeks forgiveness? I am here to forgive you all. So he thought that, how is it possible for Allah to come down to the worldly heaven? If he is coming down, it means he's somewhere up, and that is a direction, and anything that is in a direction has to be a bodily object. So Allah has a body, and anything that has a bodily object has to perish. So Allah will perish, and Allah is supposed to be eternal. But the hadith is sahih, what to do now? So he had these doubts in his mind, and instead of asking someone and presenting this question to him, he left Islam. So I said, well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, do you think Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is trying to say that Allah comes down like physically to the worldly heaven? No, that's not how it works. Allah coming down to the worldly heaven means Allah's mercy coming down at that particular time. So, and there is no problem in that. He says, yeah, but that's an interpretation. I said that indeed it is an interpretation, but Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, instead of saying Allah's mercy comes down, he says Allah comes down to show the importance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's most amazing characteristic, and that is the characteristic of rahmah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has so many characteristics, but this particular characteristic is the predominant. He says, sabaqat rahmati ghadabi, that my rahmah overcomes my ghadab. Ghadab is also his characteristic, but he says that my rahmah overcomes my ghadab. So to show the importance of this characteristic, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said Allah himself comes down, but actually it means his rahmah. So the point is that people can become apostate or they leave Islam for whatever reason, for these small things that you can consult with any scholar and you can get the answer. But unfortunately, they don't. Now, what is the root cause? There are two things, and these two things are around us everywhere in the environment. And these are the two major causes of atheism or apostasy in Islam. The first problem is called Scientism, and the second problem is called Liberalism. Scientism means that we believe that our life should be decided, the direction in our life should be decided according to science. Science will dictate what is moral and what is immoral, what is right and what is wrong. This is called Scientism. If a person wants to live his life according to the guidance he gets from science, then chances are that he will be misguided. Science is there so that we can use it. Science is not there so that we seek guidance from it. There is a huge difference. I'm not saying that science is bad. Of course it's not. We all use scientific tools and we all enjoy scientific advancement. But let me give you an example that how modern science works. Many of you perhaps heard a term, it's called the problem of black swan. What does it mean? Once upon a time in Europe, people used to believe that there are always everywhere white swan. The black ones don't exist, or they don't exist in any other color. The reason is that they only saw this bird in its white color. They never saw this bird in any other color. So they came to believe that only white swan exists. But then after the colonialism, when these Europeans started heading to other countries, especially Asia and Africa, they found that black swan exists in those regions. So then they had to change their understanding that only white swan exists. They said, no, black swan also exists. Why did they form that belief? They formed that belief earlier because they saw maybe 1,000, 10,000, 20,000, or maybe 1 million swan. All of them were white. But did they see all the swan in the world? No, they didn't. So they had formed a belief which they had to change later on. Science works like that. It is called the problem of induction. Let me give you a better example. You know, we, alhamdulillah, are now out of this pandemic. Though some people don't want to bring them out, but that's a different case, it's their personal choice, but we are. What was happening when the pandemic was there? A lot of people took vaccination. How does vaccination work? The companies and the companies that produce vaccines, they were first doing trials. Did they do trial on every single person or only on selected individuals? They did trial of those vaccines on selected individuals. For example, 20,000 people, 10,000 people, 25,000 people. They found the results. Okay, you know, this vaccine worked on 25,000 people. It should work then on everybody. This is induction. That because it worked on 25,000 people, therefore it will work on everybody, and it should work on everybody. But it is possible that it may not work for some people. It is possible. This is called problem of induction. Science is based on induction. Islamic theology is based on deduction. What it means? It means that, for example, when you ask me that how can you prove that God exists? What do I say? I would say, and this is a very common argument, I would say that everything that began to exist has a cause. Everything that began to exist has a cause. Now, can you come up with an example in this universe that began to exist but doesn't have a cause? Not a single thing. And I challenge you, not a single thing. Everything that began to exist has a cause. There is no exception here. Then we will say that this universe began to exist. Therefore, it has a cause. And that cause is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, there is more detail to this argument. But the point is that we are saying everything. We're not talking about 25,000 things. We're not talking about 1 million things. We're not saying that, you know, 99% of the things in the universe, they began to exist, but 1% things are there that they never began to exist. No, everything began to exist. This is called deduction. So deduction, the argument of deduction is concrete, is firm, it never breaks. And the argument that is based on induction is not firm, it's not definite, it may break. So scientism is the first problem. Now we start thinking and judging Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, many hadith and ayat of the Quran in the light of scientific discoveries. Now, have you ever heard any scientist who is a genuine scientist saying that all the scientific discoveries are over? We're not going to discover anything else. We have reached our maximum limit and that's it. Whatever information we have is definite and it cannot be challenged. Have you ever come across this type of scientist? This type of scientist does not exist. Science means it's always progressing. It's always evolving. And if that is the case, then suppose if you come across a scientific theory that contradicts with the Quran apparently, or contradicts with the Sunnah apparently, how can you think that this scientific theory is the last theory that humanity was able to discover, and there will be no more scientific advancement? Therefore, Quran is false. Therefore, Sunnah is false. How can you believe like that? If science has to evolve, if science has to progress further, if science will discover more and more over the time, that it is possible that perhaps today, if you find maybe one or two scientific discoveries against the Quran or against the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, tomorrow that changes. So scientism is a problem. But the bigger problem is liberalism. Liberalism that we learn in schools, liberalism that we learn in colleges, that we learn on TV, through cartoons, movies, and pretty much everywhere. It's in the environment. It's everywhere. And we, even if we want to get rid of it, we cannot. That's how much it's influencing our lives. And when we start judging Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, unfortunately, in the light of this modern liberalism, we find that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, al-iyaz billah, was at fault everywhere. because the tool that we're using to judge Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam finds him faulty. And then when we find him faulty, we say that, okay, I don't believe in him. There are three major principles of liberalism. Three major principles. The first one is called freedom. The second is called equality. And the third one is called progress. Freedom, equality, and progress. You know, we say freedom of expression, freedom to exercise our religion. All of these things fall under freedom. We say that in our environment, in countries that we live in, we have almost absolute freedom. Islam does not grant freedom. Islamic states, where the Islamic governments are, they do not give freedom to their citizens. For example, imagine if there is an Islamic country, suppose take yourself back to the time of Sahaba radiyallahu anhum, Khilafah Rashida. And a person wants to become ex-Muslim. He wants to become an apostate. And he declares his apostasy. What's going to happen? The Islamic State or the Islamic judiciary will become active and this person will be punished. So now the question is that where is freedom of expression? A person wants to express himself. He wants to live his life according to his terms and conditions. He doesn't like Islam. He wants to go somewhere else. Why don't you let him go? Why is it difficult for Muslims to digest this? Apostasy should have been permissible in Islam. So this is what people think. And they say that, look, in the modern states, in democratic states, you have freedom to choose whatever you like. But in an Islamic state, you don't have that freedom. Therefore, the modern states are superior than the Islamic state. If you think like this, it may look like that it is a sound argument, but it is not in reality. And let me ask you this question. And that's how you can understand why it's not a sound analogy. Suppose in your area in Schaumburg, in Hoffman State, in this region, if some Muslims or some community members, don't have to be Muslims, some people come together and they say that we are today declaring independence from the Union. And we're going to have our own White House here, our own president, our own foreign policy, everything our own. We don't want to be with the country. You think what's going to happen? What's going to happen to you? You cannot live peacefully. Why? Because you are adopting a policy which is against the fundamental idea of this country, against the Constitution. You cannot declare freedom or independence wherever you live. You cannot form an independent state. Within the state will become active. Similarly, in an Islamic state, Tawheed and Iman is a fundamental policy. If a person, for example, declares apostasy, and he says that I am a Christian, I am a Jew, or I'm a Hindu, I'm a Buddhist, or I don't believe in Islam, and he becomes active, propagating his false ideology, that means he is openly speaking against the state policy. And if one goes against the state policy, then the state has to be active. That's why in Islamic state apostasy is not permissible. So you see the analogy. The moment you adopt an approach that challenges the state policy, doesn't matter where you live, whether you live in America or in Russia or in any other state. The moment you go against the main fundamental state policy, the state has to become active. France, if you are in France and you are speaking against secularism, and suppose you're not born in France, you will be deported. You're just speaking against secularism. So what is freedom of expression? Well, that means freedom of expression is limited. It is not absolute. Religion and religious morality do not come in the domain of these liberal states. So that's why these liberal states don't mind whether you adopt Islam or Christianity or Judaism or this ism or that ism or nothingism. It doesn't really matter to them. Why? Because you are not violating their fundamental policy. Whatever you are doing, it falls outside of the domain of these liberal states. So those who say that we have absolute freedom in these liberal states, yes, you do. You have some freedom up to a level, but not in the matter of prime policies, only in the matter of morality or religion. The second thing is equality. The second idea of liberalism is equality. They say that we have gender equality, men and women are equal. Islam does not say that. Islam says that men are superior, women are not superior. So that's a big problem. And if it is true, indeed it is a big problem. And when we ask them, okay, how can you justify this claim? They say, well, you know what? Because in the courtroom, the testimony of two women is equal to one man. That shows that women are considered lower than men. They are not equal. But in liberal courts, men and women are considered to be equal. Whether it's a woman testifying in the court or a man testifying in the court, their gender does not affect that. Their testimony is accepted, just like a man's testimony is accepted. This objection is right, but on the basis of this objection, saying that men and women, men are superior than women, is wrong. Let me tell you this. Islam does not believe in gender equality. Islam does not. Islam believes in gender justice. It gives you roles that are according to your gender. And on top of that, there are only two genders, not 100, and then counting. We don't have a problem about pronouns. Just people are figuring out which pronoun should we use, which one, will make him offended. We don't have any of those problems. We say that the Eastern languages are homophobic. We cannot do anything. They are homophobic. In Arabic language, there is huwa for he and hiya for she. There is huma for two, hum for plural male and hunna for plural female. You call it for homophobic? Okay, go ahead. We can't help you. Because this is how the humanity lived. All its history. Then suddenly people evolved, I don't know from where, and they said, these languages are wrong and, we need special pronouns. So when we talk about equality, when we talk about gender role, they start criticizing Islam. And if you ask them, what's wrong? How come you come up with so many genders? And how come you justify transgenderism? They say, well, you know what? It is based on consent. As long as two people are doing whatever they like to do and they're not harming and hurting anyone else, then why do you have a problem with that? This is purely an emotional argument. And I'll show you inconsistency here. So they say that if two people are living together, so you shouldn't have any problem with them because they have full consent and they are not harming anyone. So a man versus a man, a woman with a woman, or whatever. So we say, okay, if consent is all what you need, if consent is everything in liberalism, and if you think when two parties have full consent, then you have no issue of morality. Then let me ask you this. In any liberal state in the world, is polygamy acceptable with consent? It is not. You say that I want to marry 4 women, all 4 women are ready to marry me. They have no problem at all. They're ready. Full consent is there, right? So where is liberalism? What is the principle of liberalism? How come you think that it is immoral? It's out of sudden it becomes immoral. It means there is inconsistency in the principle of liberalism. You ask people, not everybody who supports transgenderism on the basis of consent, not everyone is transgender. There are so many people who are straight, but they think that everyone has a right to exercise whatever he believes. So these people whose fitrah and whose intuition is not distorted yet, doesn't matter if they believe in Islam or whatever, their fitrah is not distorted yet. You ask them. So you believe that everybody has a right to live however he likes, a man with another man and a woman with another woman. What if a person wants to have consensual relation with his mother? He wants to have zina with consent with his mother. What do you think? It was, oh, it is incest. That's not acceptable. How come? What about consent? Why this consent changes over time? Why it is so subjective? Why you always do cherry picking? Why there is inconsistency in your fundamental idea? There should always be consistency. So when you think of this, of these issues like this, you will understand that this whole transgenderism, this whole gender equality thing, it is entirely based on cherry picking and the ideas of some individuals. It is not a yardstick to check the morality of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It is impossible. The third point, and inshallah then I will take questions. The third point is progress. Progress means progressivism. It means that as we are moving in time, we're moving ahead in time, we are getting morally better and better. What is the proof? There is no proof. It's just that we are getting better and better as we are moving in time. Is time a source of morality? Is that the reason why do you say? No, time is not the source of morality. Okay, then why do you say that as we are progressing in time, we are getting better and better? As a Muslim, we believe that as we go back in time, we become better and better. When we go back to the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we become better. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, "Khairul quruni qarni, thumma alladhina yalunahum, thumma alladhina yalunahum." The best generation is my generation, then the generation that will come, and then the generation that will come. So when we go back in time to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that's how we become morally better. But what makes us better? It's not time. Time does not make anyone good or bad. What makes us better is the presence of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in that time. He is the source of morality. So the source of morality is sitting there 1400 years ago. So when we go back and relate ourselves to him 1400 years ago, we become morally better because we are closer to the source. Now these people say that when we move ahead in time, we become better. What is the source of morality in the future? Nothing. There is no source of morality in the future. That if you come closer to the source, you become morally better. There is no such source exists in the future. It exists in the past. So we have a reason, we have an evidence to prove that why we morally become better when we go back in the past. They don't have any evidence to prove that why they become morally better if they move ahead in the future. These are three fundamental ideas of liberalism. There is a lot to say, and it's a huge topic, but I would also want to listen from you if you have questions. But the main thing is that it would not be fair to judge the morality of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam 1400 years later with our subjective morality. Our morality is subjective today. It is based on our choice. It is something that we came up with just 200 years or 300 or 400 years ago. It won't be fair that we judge the entire human civilization, even if evolutionary biologists, they are true, then human civilization has been there, the Homo sapiens have been there for about 100,000 years. So is it fair that on the basis of the progress of 200 years, we start judging the human civilization of 100,000 years? It is not fair. This is on the basis of subjective morality. You cannot judge the morality of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I make dua that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq to have a clear understanding about these ideas and these concepts, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala save our iman. I would like to inshallah take your questions, and I hope that you present some challenging questions so that we learn, all of us. Yes, don't hesitate, inshallah. Yes, go ahead.
So this like issue of atheism, the rise of atheism, and so how much of it is actually like people that white faith, those kind of things, how much of it is actually like an intellectual battle versus like civilizational power? For example, like obviously when the Muslims were strong, right? Like Europeans they would cover their heads and stuff like that. So the question kind of is how much is it like really intellectual versus
okay. Yeah, so the question is that atheism is rising, and the brother is asking that whether it is caused by civilizational power or is it based on academia? Is that the?
Is it really like this, like intellectualism?
Intellectualism, okay. All right. I believe that 90% of the time, and I hate to say this, but this is a reality. 90% of the time, especially among Muslims, when we see the cases of them leaving Islam, mental trauma is involved. Okay? And when we say mental trauma, most of the time, what happens that they come across some sort of tragedy in the family or in their surrounding. And they start suspecting the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's called the problem of evil. So they're already in that mental trauma. For some time, they want to change their situations, their conditions by making dua. Sometimes it doesn't work. They lose their faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Mostly, this is the case. But what you're saying, civilizational power, that also plays a very important role. Ibn Khaldun, a famous historian and Muslim philosopher, wrote in his Muqaddimah that when a group of people or a country defeats another country, the losers, they start taking their morality lessons from the winners. So we are living in time when the Western civilization is predominant. Why? After especially colonialism. Without a doubt, the Muslim countries overall are the losers. They lost their battles in the last 200 to 300 years, and the Western world is the winner. So if that is the case, that based on this psychology, we have been learning the lessons of morality from the Western world. But when we were the winners, they were taking the lessons of morality from us. That even in the West, women used to cover their head and women used to wear full dress. But now the things are changing. Now the problem is that even in Pakistan, the so-called Islamic State, the so-called Islamic Jumhuriya, or whatever they call it, the Transgender Act has been signed, and 26,000 people have registered themselves under this act. 26,000 people. What is this? It is the loser's mentality. Oh, you know what? It's so cool. Most of the time it's just the wannabe mentality. It is so cool. So in those countries where we all come from, going to McDonald's, Burger King, it is the elite idea. You belong to the elite class if you go to these places. Therefore, if you adopt these ideas that are exported from here, then these people feel that we belong to the elite class. And that's the problem. This is the power of a particular civilization. Yes.
So we briefly talked about the apostasy happens in the Islamic State, what the punishment, I guess, is. My question is, will the Islamic State allow debates between atheists and Islam, and maybe other ideologies? Is that something that will happen in Islam?
Okay, good question. The question is that we talked about the punishment of apostasy in Islamic State, but will the Islamic State allow any debate between apostates and Muslims? Right? Okay. Such debates used to take place in the Muslim world. During the time of Imam Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah, Imam Abu Hanifa, similarly Imam Baqir, Ja'far al-Sadiq, not Baqi, Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq, who's the teacher of Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, he has a book. It's about the munazara with atheists. So he used to have debates with atheists in his time. Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah's teacher. There was a whole sect during the time of Imam Ghazali rahimahullah. The sect name is Al-Batiniyah. These people were atheists and they were so active. And Imam Ghazali rahimahullah had to write several books against them. The reason why Imam Ghazali is called Imam today, he's like the Mujaddid of the 5th century, is because of his efforts against the atheists of his time. He has a book called Tahafutul Falasifa, because the Batiniyah were highly impressed by the Greek philosophy at that time. So these debates and academic discussions were taking place. The apostasy punishment is the last resort. It is not the first thing. As soon as a person says, well, you know what, I have doubts, and boom, his head is off. No, it's not like that. You know, according to Islam, a person who clearly renounces his religion, a man, will be given 3 days, and ulama will come and try to convince him that, you know, we will clear your doubts if you have any. It will be ulama's responsibility. It will be state's responsibility. Suppose he thinks, you know, I need more time. I have a lot of doubts. I need 1 year to clear my doubts. Okay, fine. You take all your time. We are here to clear your doubts. The woman doesn't have to go through this process that after 3 days, then the execution will happen. In the case of men, the execution will happen after 3 days. Why? The reason is that the man is always in the society and he's publicly renouncing Islam. He's going to do his activism against Islam. Islamic State will not allow anybody to become active against the fundamental policy, just like a secular state will not allow anybody to become active against secularism. So, because men most likely will become active, therefore Islam will not allow them. However, imagine, what is Iman? Iman is that we believe in Allah. What is kufr? That we don't believe in Allah. Imagine if a person becomes apostate and he says that I don't believe in God anymore. He doesn't go to masjid, he doesn't give zakat, he doesn't fast in the month of Ramadan. The state will never come back after you. The state doesn't know. You don't have to say anything. It is just between you and your creator. You don't believe in your creator, state cannot do anything. The state will become involved only if this person socially becomes active. And you don't have to do activism. Just because you believe in something, you don't have to do activism. Yes. Any other question?
Can we also say that when it comes to science and technology, anything new is better, is their understanding, right? So there are inventions and discoveries happening over time. So they think like if everything new is good, and they apply the same logic, apply the same on the morality and values as well. So can we use that as an argument?
Do you think, a good question, because in science they believe that everything they invent new is better. And we see that, you know, we have better phones, better computers. They apply the same logic on morality. But the thing is that, is it fair? It's not fair. Even in the field of science, let's limit ourselves to these scientific tools that modern science is inventing. For example, weapons, atom bombs, hydrogen bombs, and then you have artificial intelligence, you know, soldiers that are based on this technology. Is this morally good? It is not. It is not morally good. The more weapons and the more bombs the scientific community will be making and giving to humanity, then the danger that humanity will be wiped out will rise. So it's not like every time a scientific tool comes, it's always better. It doesn't work that way. On top of that, science has no right to set morality. Morality is not scientific domain. What sets morality? How do we know something is moral or immoral? Social norms. Socially we decide. Or we have to look back in history. We have to go and read the books of anthropology and we see, you know, how the human societies in the past were working. This is how we understand morality. It is not possible for science to decide what is moral and what is immoral. It's just a tool. Yes.
Would you say that social norms obviously are not the correct method of deciding morality as well. So what is the correct method? What makes it correct? What should we go back to in order to make that judgment of morality?
A good question and very important point. The brother is asking that social norms are also, they're not the standard of morality as well. Look, we have, I'm sure you are aware, there are two types of morality, objective and subjective. The subjective morality is based on our social norms, okay? And when it is subjective, then you have all the right to reject it or to adopt it. But there is something that is called objective morality, which liberalism does not believe in. Atheism does not believe in. Secularism does not believe in. Our current society does not believe in objective morality. But it exists. For example, if you go back and ask in time and you ask Hitler, what do you think about adl, being just? And what do you think about oppression? He will say that adl, or being just, is the most important value. And oppression is bad, is immoral. Even Hitler will say that. All the tyrants in the world will say the same thing. Even a person is not practicing justice and he is the biggest oppressor, he will say that oppression is immoral and justice is moral. Whether you are talking to the person in 2022 or go back 10,000 years, you will find the same answer. This is objective morality. The entire humanity is on the same page. So how do we get our objective morality? Where do we get it from? We get it from our intuition. Okay, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put fitrah in us. And based on fitrah, based on that intuition, we all come on the same page and we say that this is objectively moral and the entire mankind should adopt it. As for the subjective morality, there are a lot of things going on around us. We have to see if they are in line with the seerah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we can accept. And if they are against the Quran, against the Sunnah, we won't accept. For example, nowadays, it is moral, subjectively, that people acknowledge multiple genders. It is moral, based on the social norms. But does it agree with the Quran and Sunnah? No, it doesn't. Therefore, we will reject this subjective morality. You were saying something? You had a question?
How do we develop honesty in our hearts so we can absorb the Quran better?
The question is that how do we develop honesty in hearts so that we can absorb the Quran better? Okay, good question. I responded earlier that the first thing that you begin with, the first person that you begin with, if you want to be honest, is yourself. The moment you have this conviction that I don't know much, my knowledge is very, very limited. And after this conviction, when you open the Quran and you read its translation, you read the tafsir, and suppose you're stuck somewhere, you're not understanding an ayah of the Quran, you will never become judgmental. You will never say, well, you know, this is wrong, this is right. Why? Because you've already acknowledged that you don't know much. Your knowledge is very limited. We as human beings have to live our entire life with this conviction. Why? Because the ilm of Allah is like the ocean. And our knowledge, the ilm that He shared with us, is like a drop in that ocean. Then imagine if that drop, if you enlarge it and it becomes like an ocean, then our knowledge to that drop is like a drop in the ocean. That's how little knowledge we have. So once we have this conviction, inshallah, we can become honest to ourselves, and that's what is required in order to understand and absorb the Quran. Yes. Any other question? Yes. To exist. Yeah. It's deductive. The brother is asking that the first premise of the Kalam cosmological argument, that everything that began to exist has a cause, it's a deductive premise. Yes.
Can you blame someone for having
deduction based off whatever they know. So, for example, you said that everything to begin with exists as a cause. Wouldn't one turn around and say that that's only from what we know, though?
Okay, good question. So he's saying that if someone says that since we said everything that began to exist has a cause, it is based on what we know. What if we come to know things that began to exist, but they don't have a cause? It is impossible. It's not based on how much we know or our knowledge. It's impossible. Why? Because what we're saying, look at the premise. Everything that began to exist, it has a beginning. If it has a beginning, then there definitely has to be a cause, unless if you come up something in the universe that doesn't have a beginning. That's a different case. We're not talking about those things. We're talking about things that they have beginning. Now, suppose if there is a ball, you want to roll it, but you have to kick it, then only it will move. If it is moving and it doesn't have a cause, that is impossible. So you apply that logic and you say that everything that began to exist, it has a beginning. If it has a beginning, then it has to have a prior cause that kicked the ball, and that's why it started rolling. So can we come up with an example in the future? No, it is impossible. We might come up with an example of something in or outside of the universe that never began to exist, but it is eternal, and therefore it doesn't have a cause. That is possible, hypothetically, not Islamically, but logically, things that began, the word beginning itself is saying that it has a cause. Yes.
So you brought up, you touched a little bit upon secularism in the talk, and I think that's a very important point. The way I understand it is like at the individual level, the atheist, when he denies God, obviously he's denying that within his life. But when you look at secularism, in some ways, I see it as a manifestation of like almost like the political manifestation of atheism in a sense, where you deny on the government level that God has a right to legislate, right? Or has a right to have the final say. Now, I think this idea is kind of creeped in a lot into the Muslim community, especially living in the West. Whereas you almost don't even see anymore that Islam came with the mission to, take humanity out of darkness. So can you comment on this a little bit and how we counter some of the effects of secularism, especially living in?
All right, so mashallah. Okay, so the brother asked this question that I touched upon secularism and the idea that it's the men who would decide, who would legislate. And the idea of secularism is that Allah has no space in terms of legislation. And this idea has crept into the minds of many scholars. So what is my comment on that? Okay, look, if you ask a scholar who is well-versed, and you ask him that if you compare the Islamic system of governance with the secular system of governance, then definitely he will say, inshallah, that the Islamic system of governance is the best, without any doubt. But what about secularism? Is there any possibility of some sort of applying or accepting it? There is a hadith. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, Man ra'a minkum munkaran falyughayyirhu biyadihi, fa in lam yastati' fa bilisanihi, fa in lam yastati' fa biqalbihi. That if any of you sees a munkar, an evil, anything bad, then change it by your hand, meaning using force. If you cannot do that, you're not in that position, fa bilisanihi, speak up against it. Even if you're not in that position, fa biqalbihi, think that it is bad. Now, there are two types of Muslims around the world. Those who live in Muslim majority countries and those who live in Muslim minority countries. Those who live in Muslim majority countries, it is mandatory for them to work to have the Islamic mode of governance. It is mandatory upon them. Rasulullah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned multiple ayat in the Quran that in Surah Al-Ahzab, he says that no one has any choice when Allah and the Messenger decide. So Allah and the Messenger have already decided in the Quran and Sunnah how we spend our life and how we live our life. So it has to be based on the Quran and Sunnah. Those Muslims who live as minority in the non-Muslim countries, what is their status? Their status is that they are mu'ahid. The term is mu'ahid. Mu'ahid means we have this mu'ahada, this ahad, this mithaq, this covenant with the non-Muslim majority country. And the mithaq is that we live here and we will follow the rule. We will follow the law, however you make these laws. So our position in these Muslim countries is that we are mu'ahid. So living in these countries shouldn't be a problem. Now, are you allowed to actively participate in, for instance, in elections or in this process of secularism? What I believe is that majority of the scholars in the world, majority of the scholars, their fatwa is that if you are living as a minority and the only way you can obtain your rights through your participation in election, then you can. I personally used to think that that was the right decision or that was the right fatwa. But at this moment, I'm a bit hesitant to acknowledge that. And Allah knows what I will, what position I will adopt in the future. Maybe I will think that it is totally immoral to even vote, or I will think that it is absolutely fine. I'm still doing research, make dua that I arrive to a good conclusion. Yes.
So the question is, how do we explain the rise of atheism in lands like India, Makkah?
How do we explain the rise of atheism in? In the Muslim countries, okay. Yes, atheism is rising in Muslim countries as well. When we say rising, it doesn't mean like everybody is becoming atheist. It means like some people are becoming atheist. It's a reality. I mean, didn't people leave Islam during the time of Rasulullah? Of course, some of them did. So it can happen. If it happened that time, if it happened during the time of Sahaba radiallahu anhu, it can happen today. So it's not a some sort of victory moment for the atheists. It's not like that. But the reason why it's happening in those Muslim countries, especially in the Middle East, is because of the tribal traditions. For example, just recently, 4 or 5 years ago, what was the law in Saudi about women driving? Oh, they cannot drive. It's haram. You know, when the moment she's found seated in the front seat, even on the passenger seat, it was a cultural taboo. I used to live in Malaysia, and in my building, there were some families from Oman. MashaAllah, they are very nice, practicing Muslim brothers. They used to live with their families. So when I used to go to my university, I would see they're also going to the university with their families, but the wife is sitting on the back seat. The man is driving, she's sitting in the back seat. So, I mean, I would wonder that why every day the women, they always sit in the back. They don't sit on the passenger seat. So I had a classmate who was from the same country, and I asked him, I noticed this. What is this? He said, no, it's very bad. How can she sit next to you? So it's a tribal value that she has to sit in the back. Now, when women are treated like that, based on the tribal values, some of them, or men, some of these men think that, when we see the Western liberal world, we find that women can drive, they can sit next to the husband, there is no problem. And we have imposed unnecessary restrictions on these people. Then a lot of people start losing faith in Islam because they think that whatever we are being told, though it is cultural value, but it is in the wrap of, Islam. So that is a problem. But then what happened, or out of sudden, in a few years ago, they changed the fatwa. They said now women can absolutely drive, no problem. So what was haram a few years ago suddenly becomes halal. Why? Because it was never Islamic. It was also always cultural. So cultural problems are the main problems. In Pakistan, for example, some people become atheists. Why? because of the sectarian issues. People calling each other kafir. They're just, this is their focus, this is their interest, all day, all night. They're just propagating against each other most of the time. And I'm talking about the religious class. So people become fed up and they think, you know, is this Islam that you call this kafir and that person kafir and, you know, everybody is kafir, then who's Muslim? So they become fed up with these types of practices and they leave Islam. These are the main causes in Muslim countries.
So how do we break that paradigm? How do we break the paradigm of having people looking at social values, all those things to be rational? How do we break them from that and go back on the right track with teaching the law?
The question is that how do we break that paradigm? And I would say that we have to start speaking up on these issues. And I always ask this question wherever I go, that when was the last time we had a Jummah khutbah on these issues? In many masajid, we never have Jummah khutbah on these issues. So that's the time when everybody, almost majority of the musallis are in the masajid. That's when you can give a very powerful, positive message. But that's only when you know, when the khatib knows what he's talking about. So when we train our musallis every week, also in the month of Ramadan, after or during Taraweeh, when we have khatira, we have to have khatira on these issues. You know, this type of program, how many people? We're only few representing the whole community. But if the same discussion takes place, for example, on Jummah, during Jummah khutbah, a lot of people will get this message. So our khutbah, our speakers, the imams of Jummah, the imams of Taraweeh, they need to speak up. And we need to have more and more workshops and more programs on these issues. See, the issue is, the biggest problem is that we fear, we're so afraid of speaking up, especially on the topic of transgenderism. We think that we are afraid of cancel culture. So this is the reason why we don't talk about these issues. It's not illegal. If people celebrate the freedom of expression of this country, then how come you don't enjoy the freedom of expression when it comes to speaking up against transgenderism? Okay, so a lot of people are either not aware of these issues, or if they are, then they are afraid of this cancel culture by their own fellow community members. This is the big problem. Louder, please. Same logic applies to human creation. Which logic are you talking about? Everything that began to exist? Well, of course, logic applies to everything. Okay. And if you are indicating to Darwinian evolution, even Darwinian evolution believes that human began to exist, and they also have a cause. Okay, and there is a whole study behind that. But the point is that they always go to the first cell, but then the first cell also has a cause, but they can go up to a point. They don't know beyond that. Okay, but the same logic applies to that as well.
The brother is asking, so how can we make—
Who are these brothers? They're asking you on the phone. Oh, okay. Yes.
He's asking, like, how can you make Islam more appealing or less? He says in quotes boring. He says, you know, lately the attitude, like, it's been a routine and I'm not doing it.
How can we make Islam less boring? Okay. I don't know what he means by more boring. More appealing. It is already very appealing. It's just that we have to see through it. We have to remove, if there is anything on our eyes that's stopping us from seeing the beauty of Islam. That's the only reason why we cannot see its beauty. So, you know, the issue is that many times we cannot see the beauty of certain object because we live in a certain worldview. We have developed certain worldview. Okay, because of that. So for example, if you go to a country, whichever, and they are dressed in a certain way, to them, that's the most handsome style. But to you, maybe, as soon as you will see, you will say, oh, it's so disgusting. What are they wearing? The reason is that you have a certain worldview. That's why we do not acknowledge that beauty that the other people think it is. It is. Islam is entirely beautiful. Inna Allah jamilun yuhibbul jamal. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is jameel and he loves jamal. It's entirely beautiful. Why? How can we say that? It is fully consistent. There is no inconsistency. It is entirely based on fairness and justice. This is the beauty. Now, we live in a worldview that's called liberalism. From that worldview, when we start looking at Islam, we find it to be boring. And that's the problem. So we have to actually fix and correct our worldview. We have to start thinking that that worldview that we're living in, we're breathing in, is inconsistent and it is wrong. It is not morally correct.
And say that some intuitions in us are not necessarily allowed right away. For example, the intuition of lust, for example, is something that's created within us, but there are certain parameters that come around that. So would it be an inconsistency to say that intuition is an example of objective morality, or is it from directly from Quran only, or is it a mix of both?
So you're saying that the source of objective morality is only intuition, is all or Quran and Sunnah as well?
Is it only intuition? Is it only Quran? Or is it
Historically, this issue was debated among three groups: Mu'tazila, Ash'aris, and Maturidis. And the Mu'tazilites, they said that objective morality is rational and is entirely based on intuition. Whatever comes in the Quran and Sunnah is actually according to what our intuition says, according to that objective morality. That was Mu'tazilites' position. Contrary to that, Ash'aris, their position was that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is alim. He's all-knowing. He's timeless. So the Sharia, the Quran, he gave to humanity was already decided. Allah Azza wa Jal already knew before the creation of this universe. He already knew that this Quran will be given to the ummah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the objective morality based on intuition was set according to the kalam of Allah. You understand the difference? So according to Ash'ira, the objective morality based on intuition is according to the Quran and Sunnah. And according to Mu'tazilites, the Quran and Sunnah is according to the objective morality. It's the other way. Yes. But I didn't understand what you were saying about lust.
We have certain intuition is not necessarily always
Good
or constant throughout everybody. It's like, couldn't you make the argument that, okay, my intuition is, for example, if I see someone who is in need of help, they're dying out, they're bleeding, my intuition would be to look for help or to help them. But someone who's a murderer, per se, or someone who is a sadist, they like causing pain on others, their natural intuition would be to hurt the person even more.
Okay. Good question. The issue is that a person who is a murderer, serial killer, suppose he's seeing somebody dying, would he go and help him because it is objective morality and he should also be thinking that I need to help, but he doesn't help? That means it is not objective morality. No. Look, if something is objectively moral, does it mean that everybody has to practice it or everybody is actually practicing it? No. Objective morality is simply that people, when their intuition is sound and not distorted, they acknowledge it. Okay? The same serial killer, if his intuition is not distorted, meaning he is not mentally ill and his health is good, and you ask him, what do you think about murdering innocent people? And he will say, oh, it's bad. I disagree with that. But next thing is that he would be doing it. It means at least he acknowledges that it is bad. Though he acts upon it or he doesn't act upon it is a different case. So acknowledging something shows that it is objective morality. Yes.
If you can clarify intuition, because there is a definition in today's society for intuition. I think what you mean is a little bit different when you say it's intuition. You call it fitra.
Fitra, that's true.
Can you expand upon that definition so it's clear that when you say intuition, you mean fitra?
Okay, I think with examples I can explain. Fitra is something that all of us have in our mind by birth. There are few examples that I will give. In fact, two. Number one, tahara, cleanliness. Number two, adl, being fair and just. And number three is called ikhbat. Ikhbat means obedience. We all are born with these few fundamental ideas. We all have obedience to certain ideology, to certain state, or there's a whole hierarchy system always present in our life. All of us like to be clean, though we have different standard of cleanliness. And at the same time, we all like to be fair and we want to be treated with fairness and with justice. So this is fitrah. Now, all the religions, they are based on these 3-4 ideas, especially Islam. You know, at-tuhuru shatrul iman. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam says that cleanliness is half of iman. Obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the main thing in Islam. Adl is the main premise of Quran. Inna Allah ya'muru bil adl. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands adl. So this is that we all are born with. But what happens that over time, our fitrah becomes distorted. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam says in the Quran, in the Hadith, that kullu mawludin yuladu ala al-fitrah. That every child is born with that fitrah. فَأَبَوَاهُ يُهَوِّدَانِهِ وَيُنَصِّرَانِهِ وَيُمَجِّسَانِهِ. Then his parents or the environment turn him either a Jew or a Christian or a Majusi or an atheist or a liberal or whatever. So his fitrah is distorted because of the environment. Now your definition of, you acknowledge that adl is the most important thing, most important value, but your definition of adl would be different. You will be treating yourself with adl and justice, but not others with justice. So it is environmental influence on us, but we are all born with that fitrah, that innate quality that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created in us when we were born.
Just from my own understanding, there's something innate that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created in us called fitrah. And that fitrah are those things that we described. Now, the concepts that come within society, within the environment, they come to override our fitrah, meaning that they collide with it. Well, and when that concept becomes more predominant in thinking. So, and that's how, when you say intuition is that ability to have that fitrah or that innate ability that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put us into, has given us, to use that. And the environment comes, and that environment, what you say, distort, that distortion is another concept comes in front of that fitrah and says, this is what you do.
Right. So it is just like, you know, when you're born with the ability of seeing things, and someone puts something on your eyes and your eyesight is blocked. So you won't blame your eyes now. It is something on your eyes. That's why you're not able to see. Similarly, this environmental pressure, it distorts our fitrah. It is just like that cloth that is put on your eyes. But we are born with that fitrah, with that innate ability. That's why the moment we are isolated from that culture, we are put away from that environment, we start thinking straight. The fitrah will be there until we die. Yes. All right. Jazakumullah khairan. Thank you very much. Barakallah feekum. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq to follow the Quran and Sunnah. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.